How you going, guys? My name's Nick, right, Ikarus from Christchurch. I'm not as smart as everyone else, so I just brought one image and then didn't actually prepare anything that I was going to talk about. So I guess a lot of my stuff, like a lot of the stuff I had in mind to talk about, a lot of the people have covered, and I'll probably just give my own perspective on some of the things that people have said already. Starting with like a background, I guess, like a lot of kids, a lot of people that get into it, I started out as just a tagger kid. Wasn't actually particularly interested in the art side of it. I used to call it borderline graffiti. Didn't really interest me to do any of it because all I really wanted to do was go out and write my name on stuff. As the years progressed, like when we said we sort of worked together as we got older, I kind of got caught a bunch and I had to go to court and stuff. And I was getting older, I was kind of in my 20s. I found it a little bit embarrassing to be going to court just for tagging. So my plan was that I was going to learn to do like a simple kind of straight letter chromie or gold fill or one colour fill, and I was just going to paint that so much in my city that if a kid grew up in Christchurch and he didn't know who I was, I could just feel like it was his fault, not mine. You know, I'd be like, well, I paint a lot, I don't know where you've been. So that was kind of all I was looking for, you know, and then as we got older, you know, it went from like one colour fill to you would get a little bit of paint. Decipher was really instrumental. He would do things like, I can remember a day specific, because I would kind of, I'm that kid that would have a black book, do 30 pages of tags and maybe one, like half a piece, you know. And he kind of saw this one piece that was in my book and he said, I'll give you this entire crate of paint, which might have been 30, 40 cans, more paint I'd ever had at the time. He said, but you've got to do this particular piece and you've got to finish it. You've got to go to the way to the end. And I went, oh, all right. And I did it, and then I did it and I was like, oh, it's, you know, it's not as bad as I thought it would be, it's okay. And from there we sort of progressed. We started, like Wong was saying, we started doing like walls. Me and Decipher would paint pieces, Wong would paint giant characters. As that went on, then we started putting in background buff just to get rid of the tags behind us. Started like incorporating scenery for the characters to live in, you know, like let's make worlds for our characters instead of just painting a wall. From there, I guess people saw us doing walls. That led to like our first little commission jobs. And eventually Decipher got a job at a government-funded initiative called Project Legit, which was like a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. He would be in an office, but basically they would do commission works, they would do youth groups, like workshops with youth, they would do a bunch of different stuff going around to schools and just doing talks about like the positive side of graffiti. So a lot of like what I'll be talking about is probably that, because once he left to move to LA onto sort of leveling up his own career, I was lucky enough to be offered the job at Project Legit, arguably before I was like technically like skillfully ready for it. You know, I really wasn't in a position to actually be doing large commission works and stuff, but the way the city was, there's only 2, 3, you could come to me, you could come to Wong, you could come to Decipher. Decipher was gone. I was lucky enough to get it. So through that, I think a lot of the stuff Bobby was saying resonates a lot, because I came up in that same thing, and through doing a lot of this youth work, you do see the positive. I mean, I'm actually like the living proof of it. Like I say, I was like the knucklehead kid that was in, no, I'm just going to bomb shit forever. And then you eventually go, okay, I can't actually do that. That's not a feasible thing. To just do that and you know, just continue to get in trouble. Because I guess I was like, if I'm going to get caught doing this stuff, like I want it to be of a level that's worth getting caught for. I'm not trying to go to jail for tagging. I was like, I'll go to jail for doing chromies maybe, but not tagging. And so over the years, yeah, so now we're working at Project Legit. We're working with a bunch of kids, and a lot of what Bobby was saying about the identity and the community of it, like that's all super true, because like you said, you paint a wall. I can still remember the first legal wall I painted in our local park for like a little festival, and it was exactly that. It was like, well, now I'm not tagging that, now my boys aren't tagging that. The next crew that comes along, you know, they get to paint it, it's the same thing. And I used to get asked a lot, like, they'd say what Wong was saying earlier with, oh, I love the stuff you do, but I hate tagging, you know, I hate the tagging stuff, and I'm kind of like a really stubborn, staunch defender of it, because that's where it all comes from, like all these beautiful native birds and portraits and murals that you see around the city, like none of that would exist if some kid hadn't gone out and written his name on a subway train. So I have that argument, and they tell me it's, you know, there's nothing to it, and why, you know, they would ask a lot why a kid does it, and I think a big part of that, when you're like, you know, some shitty teenager, you're not good, like Bobby was saying, not good at sports, maybe you don't play rugby, that's a big thing. New Zealand, if you don't do these things, you don't necessarily have a place that you fit in. The first time you go out and do a bunch of tags and you get up in the morning, one of your friends goes, hey, see all those tags you did, man, it's pretty cool. To a lot of kids, like, that's more positive reinforcement than they've had. for anything they've done before. So they're just going to go get another can and they're going to go keep out and they're going to keep seeking out that, that reinforcement. And then that also leads into the stuff he's doing, talking about working with youth in workshops, because that energy can be channeled somewhere else. Like I say, I was so knuckleheaded I didn't want to do it, but like, okay, you're going to give us... Actually, one of the first pieces I ever did, I got community service, I got caught tagging. I got community service at the local youth drop-in centre. And they were like, well, he does this stuff, why just make him... Actually, what they did, instead of just making me clean, they said I could do 50% cleaning and 50% painting. And I went, oh, I don't really do pieces, like I'm just doing it. And they went, well, okay, you can just do cleaning. And I went, oh, okay, no, well, I'll just... okay, then, okay. And so I think one of the first pieces I ever did was for them, and it said nerd, because I was like, only nerds do pieces, but I mean, and these are those things, like when you're a youth, sometimes you get kids, you might work with them on a workshop, and they think the workshop's going to make them an artist. Straight away, they're going to do it, and they're going to be able to go out and do a piece. And it's sort of like looking back at those things there, like I didn't think they were very important. The first workshops, Johnny Wortman for Hire, PS5, ran in Christchurch. I did it to get free paint, and I was like, I don't want to listen to anything he says, but I'll just get this free paint. But then when you look back several years later, you go, oh man, these were the first steps. Those guys at the youth centre saying do paint instead of just cleaning. Like that led to this, and then that led to the next thing, and then suddenly it snowballed to this thing where Bobby was talking about. From there we've done, exhibitions, which is something we never looked at doing. I've had like sort of different toys made. Like I did an exhibition once where a friend of mine, I made a bunch of characters and a friend sewed together a bunch of like soft toy ones, and I made like a bunch of clay models of them all, and we made backstories for them all and all this other stuff. And then moving on to like clothing, doing designs for clothing companies or like people I know that have their own clothing lines. All that sort of stuff stems from it, and it's not something you see, when you're this kid that's doing tagging where you're going out to write your name on stuff, or like, when we were doing those crazy big walls in our city, it was hard to... There came a point where Disrupt came out and there was a magazine that you get in, or like Liew was talking about the Hip Hop Summit. The first time that the Hip Hop Summit was on, they approached us and were like, we're going to fly you up to paint this thing. We were like, what? What do you mean? It wasn't a thing, but it was another, there you go. This is the same positive reinforcement. I'm talking about those kids on that level. We got on this level where we were like, oh, there's people in other cities taking notice of what we do. That's pretty crazy. And then Disruptive magazine came out, and suddenly it seemed like there was actually a point. I don't know if any of you guys felt like this, but we would see your guys' stuff and be like, oh shit, we got to go burn. We're going out there to burn, and we're going to go do our thing, and we're going to get in that magazine with the rest of these guys. And I remember us asking them, like, why were we painting before? Like, why did we paint when there was no magazine to get in, and there was no other thing? What was that? And you look back, and it's just, like I say, these little things, these little positive reinforcements. I mean, it gives you something to do. It's for a long time it was just us hanging out with friends, doing something we all enjoyed before it became. Before it turned into anything professional, it was just that. And I think where Bobby was talking about the positive aspects, like too much, and again, not to talk down about any of the councils or anything around the city, because it is such a delicate thing when you're dealing with it. But a lot of the time, I think you guys will find the same, is they feel that if they're supporting this side, they're supporting the other side of graffiti. They're supporting the negative side and the vandalism side. They had the same worries at the Christchurch Museum when they had, they didn't want to put on that exhibition. They didn't want to put on Rise because they felt like it would be condoning the vandalism side of the art form, as well as, they wanted to present the artistic side. They didn't want to be lumped in with the negative side. Then they took a chance, and then they broke all their attendance records. Like, it smashed them out of the park. It was like 300,000 visitors in 6 months.
It was the most visitors.
It was literally the most visitors they'd ever had. Like, I think, it broke their opening weekend. It broke their overall, it just broke all their records. I don't think anything since then would have. I remember talking to an old lady that worked at the cafe there, and she said she'd worked for 6 years, had never been to an exhibition, and was going to this one. They hate tagging, they hate graffiti, but then a lot of the time, we could be out there just marking up the first lines, the first colour lines, and they come along and they tell you it looks great, and you're like, come back tomorrow, I'll blow your mind if you think this is good. But a lot of people just don't understand the process, they don't understand. I once had a lady, I was lucky enough to get the job at Project Legit. I used to work with a few intellectually disabled and mentally challenged students. I'd spend one day making a stencil, a stencil canvas with a kid, and it was just like the Auckland Warriors logo. And his carer had come back to look for him, and I just said, I think we've seen it now. you know, and I was just showing her the process. I was saying, you know, we looked for the image on Google, and we printed out the image, and then we made layers, and then he cut out these layers, and then we applied them layer by layer. We put the colours in, and now he's got this finished product. And she said to me, I really didn't know so much went into it. She said, I've seen those pictures with the can with the picture on it, and I thought you bought a can with a picture on it and you just waved it around in front of the wall and it came out like that. And I started cracking up, like I thought she was joking, so I start laughing, oh, it's amazing. And then I look at her and she's just like stone-faced looking at me like, why is he laughing? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, that doesn't exist, but that would put me out of job, like I would be out of a job for sure. You know, and like that level, you know, that level of sort of, I don't want to call it ignorant, but I mean, it's a little bit ignorant, you know, like plain and simple, isn't it? You know, so that's the thing. People just don't understand it, and the more you are out at these things, and the more people get to interact, I think, you know, because a lot of the time they think a person that does graffiti is this sort of person, and they do this, and they're like this, and they're not eloquent, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't have anything to say, and then they meet. I mean, especially the people that are in the communities that exist now, because the whole art form has progressed so far, and now it's such a bigger, diverse melting pot. You know, like it's becoming more widely acceptable, but then also, I mean, I recall hearing the word gentrified thrown in, you know, which I think is actually a pretty big problem, because myself, I'm like traditional graffiti. Like I actually didn't bring a lot of photos because I didn't know. I was surprised to hear Kezam and Ceap talk about feeling like their work is all the same, their pieces are all the same, because I get that all the time. People say to me like, your letters are the same all the time, why do you do that? And I have the same reasons for it, the iconography and the easy recognition that people were talking about before, but like I kind of didn't want to bring a bunch of them and have to defend it, and I didn't know that other people felt like that as much, so I might have if I knew that. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know what my point was there, to be honest. I sort of forgot. I should have had notes. I might just be rambling now.
You've done a good job so far.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of it, there were so many things that people were saying while they were talking, you know, and I was just like, oh, I know, I'm going to say a little bit about that, I'm going to say a little bit about that. Oh, the gentrification side of it, that's what it is. Being that I'm really into the traditional letter-based forms of graffiti, and because, I mean, I think without graffiti, if I hadn't moved into like doing art and getting paid to do art and getting commission works and sort of like doing more positive, I was up to a bunch of negative stuff, man, when I was young. So like, a lot of the friends that I have that were hanging out then they still have pretty negative lives, you know what I mean? Like, there's not been a lot of evolution, and I think in that sense, like, without graffiti, that's definitely the path. But it's kind of that thing where graffiti might have, like, not to be corny, but saved my life. If I ever go to jail, it's going to be for graffiti, which is a weird, you know, it's a weird line that I feel some of us have to walk. And so, like, yeah, behind that, the gentrification of it, what that means to me is that, like, and I don't want this to be offensive to anyone, but when I see these festivals and the street art festivals that come out, and it's all just big portraits and a giant whale, and it's a big bird, or it's a local, some scenery, you know, like, all that stuff is dope, and like the fact that it's all graffiti and it's all the same thing, and it's all stemmed from this is dope. But I feel like these festivals really negate the importance of traditional graffiti, and I've only just in the last year stopped calling it real graffiti. Okay, so traditional graffiti, letter-based, color-based, you know, wild stuff, characters. I feel like that stuff gets left out of these festivals a lot, because you don't really ever see these festivals and then just see some, you know, occasionally, like maybe Berst, you go and do some big stuff, you know, I know, like when you came down for Spectrum, big piece in your thing, you know, and that was important to you to be representing the letter side of it, same as me, well, I did the same thing. That side of it I find is really important, because it's almost the same thing as you're talking about the history of your city, your history of the various cities, because we've got the same thing in Christchurch with the undocumentedness, or if it is documented, it's not pulled and collaborated into one place. You know, there's a bunch of people out there with the photos, but there's no one that's actually, you know, there's a few of us that know the history, the kids are interested in it, but no one, you know what graffiti writers are like, it's hard to get them together to do anything but paint their name. So a lot of that gets lost, and I feel like as much as it's dope for the new emerging culture that's becoming of it, I think a lot of the traditional, the roots of it, and a lot of the history of it is getting lost, because no one really goes to this thing. Or, I mean, I don't even think it's a matter of no one going to it and representing it as. I think the people that put on the festivals that's not necessarily what they want, you know, like easily palatable, beautiful things are easy, palatable, beautiful things. Whereas to a lot of us, like tags, throw-ups, abandoned buildings, train yards, like that shit is beautiful. You know, like abandoned buildings are probably some of my favorite places in the world. You know, like I like an abandoned buildings photo.
2 minutes, right?
Yeah, more than a running panel. Yeah, that's the thing, man. I think I can't talk in public, but then when you get on graffiti and like there's those things, it's like, oh, I watch your guys 15 minutes. It's like I could talk about that subject for 10 minutes. I could ramble about that. So yeah, I think as my closing statement will just be that, like a warning, and it's probably a warning half the room doesn't care about, and 90% of the population doesn't care about, but the more that these festivals come up and it's just large walls of easy, palatable, beautiful images, the more like the history of it's going to be lost. And you know, because a lot of artists that have got into it now like don't have a traditional graffiti background. Before, you know, Bob was saying a lot of people have come up that way, but now it's not necessarily the same thing. And I think the more that stuff happens, the more traditional graffiti will sort of get thrown to the wayside, forgotten about, maybe spoken of as like a, you know, something cute that used to happen before you know, we became this evolved culture that now has beautiful big walls everywhere. And that would be super sad, because the positive side of it has for, like, you know, your local kid from the hood. And not to use an example, but like Fat One as an example, super vibrant example of that, of like a hard upbringing, finding art and then moving to amazing places. I think you will lose that, because a lot of the stuff that's palatable now from a lot of these large scale works that are going on is palatable, not as palatable to those youth. Because the thing that gets the kids involved in graffiti is the name, writing your name, having your name known, and that becoming part of your identity. And I would just hate to see those positive aspects of it lost in the move to go to
That's
more of that side.
That's the tangible thing that Ross mentioned at the very beginning around, you know, street art festivals becoming so popular, but a young person that sees a person on a scissor lift 2 stories up, they're not going to think that they are capable of doing that, because that's some advanced art form. But writing my name, I can do that.
That's one of the things I explained. This is definitely last thing I say. But they say, why do they tag? Because it's easy. It's easy to get a can. Why don't more kids do what you guys do? Because it's fucking hard. You got to get a dozen, 2 dozen cans of paint. You got to find someone that's going to let you paint their wall and stand there for X amount of hours and do this thing. Like, that's harder to, you know, it's harder for a kid to do that. Like, it's so easy to get a can and go and write your name. And if you don't, like what we were saying, zero tolerance doesn't work. How long's graffiti been around? How much of it have you eradicated? How much has the budget gone up every year? You know, like that doesn't work. So these sort of things are definitely the roads to finding the avenues that do work, because we're the ones, we came from it.